Hello everybody, I'm Gavin and I'm the British Bookworm. So today I'm reviewing a book which has made me feel a lot of emotion, a lot of frustration, a lot of irritation and a lot of anger. But as the book is a well written book. I like a lot of the points in the book as somebody who believes in doing what's best for the human race and for the environment and for the protection of the planet. I do have a lot of agreement, a lot of common ground with the author. However, I have a very strong opinion on the information that's been presented by the mainstream media and a politically driven agenda within a scientific community which has a bias. Science should be unbiased. Science that is not unbiased is not science. Science that is driven by a political agenda is not science. It is just not science. Science is a neutral fact or a neutral fact searching authority which should have no bias whatsoever. So I'm going to try and keep this really short because this is now my fourth video on this. So for those who are watching this, I basically read books and review them. I read books on many different subjects and I have been reading for many years, and the goal is ultimately to read 1,000 books, which I'm like a third of the way in, which I started 4 or 5 years ago now. I've read many more books in the years. I'm 43. I've read possibly more than 1,000 books over the year since I've been like 13 years old. So that's the basis. So I'm reading books and reviewing them and just basically expressing how I feel, what I felt, and kind of what I took from it and what I didn't agree with, what I felt about it. So to try to keep this video short, because now this is the fourth video I've done, this is the fourth take on it, I'm going to give the book a 4 out of 5. I like the idea that the idea of the book is you have $1 trillion to invest in issues that will be for the betterment of mankind. So how to spend $1 trillion, the 10 global problems we can actually fix, by Rowan Hooper. Now, I really like that idea. I think that it highlights the point that the way we spend our money on as a race, as a human race, the way we spend our money is baffling to me. This guy does get across how much good we could do with $1 trillion, with this gigantic sum of money, which is equivalent to 1% the world GDP, and he illustrates like how we can, and he uses COVID in this, like how we've used COVID and we've thrown money at COVID as a problem, and I think he discusses it like 9 to 12 trillion dollars were just thrown into the COVID crisis when we have a global catastrophe at work. Now, my point I'm making is if we have a pandemic which is killing people, which is supposedly killing and deadly and lethal, and we can bring out 12 trillion by printing money and creating money on computers, and yet for the last 22 years or more we've had nothing but this notion that CO2 is this great evil, this plant food is this great evil, this 0.04% of the atmosphere is having this catastrophic effect on the atmosphere and on the world climate. Something that's 0.04% is having this catastrophic effect, when we know for a fact that CO2 levels has been significantly higher in the millions of years of Earth's history We know that for a fact. But we also know for a fact that scientists are human beings and they lie to promote their narrative. Now, it's really hard to keep this video, as I've just said, I've done 4 takes, on point, because it's such a massive subject. What this guy covers in this book is a just massive subject. So I was originally going to get 5 or 10 points out through reading it and just like say, well, these are my thoughts. I do really like how he's broken it down. I found the AI chapter at the end really interesting. I found finding the reality of the universe really scientifically interesting. But this has been written by Rowan, who works for the New Scientist. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that the New Scientist magazine was part of the lies and deceit over the pandemic, or they certainly helped lie over the pandemic. So am I going to trust this author who has got bias? No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'll rate your book 4 out of 5. I recommend it to people. If you believe climate change, that man-made climate change, is throwing us over this precipice of doom, then you'll love this book. Personally, I found this book extremely frustrating to read. I've spent a very large percentage of my life and time educating myself. I'm not a scientist. I am, by definition, a nobody with a non-existent YouTube channel at this present time of doing this video. But I do believe that in the time that I've invested learning about things because of my acceptance that I'm ignorant and that I need to be better informed, that I spent nearly, or a very large percentage of my free time academically learning about things. In that time, I've learned to be better at critical thinking, evaluate truth and honesty, and to decipher through bullshit. Now, to be clear, I am an environmentalist. I think we need to love each other, protect the planet, consider other people's feelings, to try to do what's right for the world population. But I also believe that there is a very nefarious political climate agenda at work in the world, and people only see we live in a time of the war is on information. So we live at a time where information is the battlefield, and people with an agenda want to present their segment of a pie. We say like 5, 10, 15, 20, 30% of their pie. They want to present that part of truth to you and say that is the whole truth. Therefore, we must do this. And that is essentially what the argument is in this book. From meat eating to CO2 emissions to ecosystems being destroyed to mass extinction events, these things are presented in a certain way, which I'll be the first person, if you prove it, if you show me the evidence, right? If you show me the evidence, I'll be the first person to step back and go, well, I'm sorry that I had that I doubted you. But based on everything that I've researched online, and based on the fact that I can see propaganda for what it is, which for some reason a lot of people can't see in the world population, and these people know that if they present information a certain way, they'll push towards the cause, they'll get the majority of the population coming with them. So for example, look into ClimateGate, look into the inconvenient truth. look into Al Gore, look into the IPCC scandal. When people present things and they're caught out lying, you can no longer trust them. So even if you have a group of people who decide that they have to lie to shift the population to their side on an argument, even if they're doing it for the betterment of the planet, and even if they're on the side of truth, if they get caught out doing that, then they're endangering their cause. Even if the alarmist movement on climate change are all telling the truth, if they're telling us the truth, which I don't believe that what they're presenting is the truth, all right, and that's where, if you watch this and this video ever gets any traction, I'll get stick. But I'm coming at this from a point of view of someone who's a layman, who's literally listened to numerous people over many years, looked into things, and I can see lies when it's there. I can see propaganda when it's there, and I'm saying, well, present to me, if you can present to me why man-made CO2 since the 1950s has a much worse effect than natural CO2 that's been significantly higher in millions of years of the Earth's history, but now man-made CO2 is significantly worse. If you can present to me through maybe some kind of scientific basis that the CO2 that fossil fuel burning is worse than the CO2 that's emitted naturally, then I'll may listen. But I've never seen that presented to me. Just like I was never ever shown any scientific data that masks stopped transmission of C19. It didn't. And I knew, after wearing masks for 5 months religiously and following the rules, then I start to question what I'm being told, which I did. And again, I did a very large amount of research over the facts of the pandemic, and I've listened to people who were censored. When you start censoring the other argument, and your argument is, well, if we don't censor these people on this side, they might gain traction, which might actually hurt or kill or harm more people. The problem with that is you might think you're on the right side, but what happens when your science is proven wrong and they were proven right? And if we'd have followed their science or their opinions of the science literature, we could have saved many more millions of people from dying. And that's what happened. So this was written before COVID-19 hit the world. Now, COVID-19, I don't know about you, but if you're listening to me now, I don't know about you personally, but to me, what I found was that there was a conspiracy of lies over the pandemic, and anyone that questioned those lies because they did some critical thinking and initial research, found that they were not being told the whole truth. Now, if you're not told the whole truth, are you saying the partial facts are somewhat the truth? If I tell you 70% of the truth but miss 30% out, is it the whole truth? It's not, is it? And the reason why the pandemic is very relevant to this is this guy basically wants you to believe the scientific community, which has a political agenda. If you want to, they say money is a great evil. If you want to say, well, why would they want to lie about global man-made warming, right? It's a very difficult one to hit because it's very hard to get your head around. But money influences people. We know for a fact, I know for a fact, based on my research, that people who want to try to prove a counter argument to man-made CO2 emissions affecting the global Earth temperature, they can't get funding. We know that based on the scientific community that have tried to speak out and have been annihilated by mainstream media, by the peers that are meant to somehow have a neutral bias. You're not meant to be driven by the emotionality of a topic. You're meant to be driven towards being a scientific truth seeker based on the scientific and mathematical evidence. So I am going to that point where I start rambling, so I'm going to try and get back on topic. So Rowan Hooper's book gives away by a couple of sentences throughout his book that he's politically driven. Then we know the New Scientist try to make out that the idea that C19 came from the laboratory, that New Scientist as an organisation, scientific magazine, tried to make out that the Wuhan laboratory was a conspiracy theory. Now, we know that that was an agenda, that was a conspiracy that happened by the scientific community. We know that that was, without doubt, a scientific conspiracy that was promoting a lie for their agenda, which I've watched many highly intelligent people online who are pedigree scientists who are unable to explain why they did that, why their opposition blatantly lied. We know the New Scientist covered that up. We know that the New Scientists tried to cover up that. Losing track of my thought now. So we basically know that Rowan Hooper works for a magazine that, while I respect his education, he's got a PhD, I don't have any scientific background. We know that you work for an organisation or a body that went up and supported lies. We know that for a fact. So we know that you are automatically not trustworthy because of where you're coming from. You're writing this as a separate person from the New Scientist, fair enough. But we know that in this book, that I know, if I got this book and presented this to some people that are experts in climate, the climate change, who are well rehearsed in the facts, I know that they could pull your book apart. I support you on the notion that we shouldn't eat anywhere near as much meat as we do. I think it's unbelievably bad as a human race how we treat animals, even though I don't promote or I'm not a vegan or vegetarian. I have bias and a dislike for their movements automatically by the way they represent their arguments, again in massive bias. So as a truth seeker, I find it terrifying that we get locked into stories, and I might be doing that now. I will happily change this status of my thought and thinking if presenting it. But after watching hundreds of hours probably of lectures, speeches, presentations on climate change, nobody's presented anything that convinces me. On the contrary, I've seen that the IPCC were caught out lying. The IPCC are basically scientists whose entire livelihood is based off this notion on CO2 emissions destroying the planet. That their entire funding comes from that. That if there was a scientist to stand up at a university level and wish to promote a thesis that presents climate change, CO2 emissions aren't destroying the planet, they won't get any funding. That's what I've learned from listening to scientists from the scientific community. I also know that the peer review literature is basically the gatekeepers. There are only a handful of scientists in certain, the peer review establishment who basically are in positions of authority that stop any literature coming out that promotes a counter argument. So my point is, I don't buy into it. I really like the book, Rowan Hooper's book. If you are a really heavily enthusiastic man-made climate alarmist, you're going to love his book. He don't just cover that, but the reason why I'm talking that more heavily is that the majority of the book is on how to reduce CO2 emissions to net zero. I don't buy into net zero. I don't buy into the alarmism that we have in the world. I don't like Greta Thunberg. I think she's a lunatic. I think that the majority of people are very ignorant. I think that people's level of ability to critical think is shocking. And this book and the biases in it go into that. He puts in race. Why are you putting anything in to do with race, like your idea of not being able to call a base on the moon Shackleton because of it's connected to the British Empire? I mean, what the actual fuck, yeah? What about celebrating history? What about naming a base on the moon for one of the greatest expeditioners of all time, Shackleton? But you don't want to name that because you're a politically driven idiot scientist who has biases. Personally, I haven't researched you, but just by reading your one book, by a couple of things that you've put in it, I can automatically, as a critical thinker, evaluate you as a person. The very fact that you think Joe Biden, before he's elected, obviously you've written this book before he's elected, he's written this book before Joe Biden comes in. How could you ever even think that Joe Biden is going to be better than Donald Trump? You have to be the highest level of idiot to think that. So just because someone's a scientist doesn't automatically give them credit in logical thinking at all. If you think that, even though I'm not in any shape a pro-Trump, I respect Donald Trump because he says it as it is, even if you don't like it. Where the likes of Joe Biden will say things for populism. Now, why that's relevant to my review on his book is that he clearly gives away his bias. Now, as a scientist, shouldn't you come at this more neutral? The idea that we should spend money, the COVID thing brought out, we can bring all this money into a situation to tackle a problem. You're bringing up $1 trillion, great idea, but the notion that we can bring up loads of this money over COVID for a pandemic that's killing people, which was killing what was it? Less than 0.8%. Less than 0.8% of those who were infected. You know, I mean, that's another subject, isn't it? But we can bring up all this money, but for a work. So let me put this point, and then I'm gonna finish because I'm doing my own editing, right? The book has some fantastic educational points in it. I found it thoroughly, engrossingly interesting. But I also know that the book is full of drivel. And that there are people out there who could read this book from the academic establishment and they could pull it apart. The Patrick Moore, Lord Mockington, people who are scientists that know about the climate could pull some of the facts apart. CO2 emissions were much higher millions of years ago before the industrial evolution. We know that for a fact based on the scientific data. We know from the IPCC on scientific data that even if we get to net zero, the Earth's temperature is only going to be stopped rising by like 0.4 of a degree or something like that. I think it's 0.3 based on listening to Lord Mockington. But so you're wanting to put all these billions and trillions of pounds into this, to stopping this ultimate disaster, to stop a 0.4 degree raise, when we know that that's not even possible. So the whole basis is just it's an economy. The climate change alarmism is basically a economy. It's when there's so much money being thrown and invested into something, it's going to become extremely corrupt and powerful. And that's all I'm going to say. I could go into this subject much deeper. It's very frustrating to do this video. I'm feeling really frustrated. I feel like I can't even communicate my points very well. But as somebody who is a nobody, I've done a lot of research on climate change. I find that to finish off the last few points. Last few points. We've just had a pandemic which was driven by a supposed consensus of science, where the fraction or fringe of scientists who were showing data clearly more succinctly, clearly more honestly, proving the data that they are presenting were more genuine, more honest, clearly the truth from ivermectin to other factors of the equation, to vaccine injuries, to the dangers of vaccination, to the pointlessness of vaccine mandates. We've just had an entire infrastructure of science present itself and basically lose all credibility. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it, even though I've deleted a few videos for saying this, the same thing. If you believe the scientific community, the foundations of the scientific community over the pandemic, you're a fucking idiot. As someone who's researched this, I research as a nobody, as somebody who doesn't really think themselves any higher than anybody else. I do believe that you all have a duty to be critical thinking, and I researched the crap out of COVID-19. I followed it, I followed the science, I listened to every argument I could, and I looked into it, and I believed in the majority of it at the time. And then I started to see that they were covering up and censoring anybody that tries to censor things. You don't have a right to censor anybody, whether it's science, whether it's about life or death or not. You don't have the right to start censoring people. They censored people that now have been proven to be true. In COVID, they censored people, they censored elite world-class scientists from being able to put their views on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, because of social media. It's all part of the world-established movements, and they censored it. And now all those scientists have been proven right. Both on every level they were proven right. And the Fauci's and the people that, the anti-Fauci's and the people that presenting this argument the world followed, and the scientific community just went behind them due to the funding issues, due to their livelihoods being taken off them if they went off the subject, doctors losing the right to practice medicine. The whole movement was basically driven by lies, deception and money. And if you don't believe that, you're a fucking idiot. And that's all I've got to say to you. We are living in a war of information, right? Where people that want to manipulate you will present you a slither of the pie and present you that as the truth and then try and pull you that way. The IPCC have done that. The idea that there were a 99 point whatever consensus to global warming, man-made global warming, it's just not true. And I'm telling you, I don't care who you are, it's just not true. The consensus is not there. That consensus idea comes from the IPCC. Now, the IPCC have been thoroughly debunked on this consensus, where they were using janitors and cleaners supposedly to be put in the documents as if they were scientists signing this consensus, and the way the question was put in such a way that was being able to manipulate. When they questioned 3,000 scientists, they put this consensus. Well, there's more than 3,000 scientists in the world. Anyway, they never mention the father of the meteorological channel in America, who had 10,000 PhDs and 20,000 degrees, so 30,000 scientists write on a letter and sign it against Al Gore, against the notion of a disaster happening by CO2. 30,000 scientists. Did you know that, by the way? So if you believe, so I'm going to say that to you again: 30,000 scientists, 10,000 PhD scientists, and 20 other thousand degree scientists, many meteorologists within that, signed a letter basically disagreeing with the notion that CO2 emissions are causing global warming. So we have IPCC, which I think had 3,000 scientists or something like that involved in their paper, and 30,000 scientists over in America signing this open letter. But you didn't even know that, did you? So unless you're willing to critically think, then just shut up. Now I'm saying that if I'm presenting information that proves other people wrong based on the science, based on what they're saying and how they present their argument, just like over COVID, then I'll listen to you. If you can present a counter argument about climate change that convinces me and shows that the other side have been actually trying to kind of like biasly present information in a certain way, then I'll listen to you and I'll take it in and I'll critically think about it. The problem is climate change has so much money behind it. So many people are making money off it. Now I'd say this to you. That being said, how is it, if it's a fact that if we reach so many tons of CO2 emissions in the next 12 years that we're doomed to this 2 centigrade warming, or 1.5, or whatever you want to call it, and the seas are going to rise, we're going to have mass extinction events. If that's true, then why in the last 20 years have the government not been able to pluck all this money, this $9 to $12 trillion that they've been able to pluck in 2 years over a pandemic that killed less than 0.4% of those infected with it over the base, or the average? But we're looking at the entire human race being made extinct through this global warming. So I'm asking you a question. Why can't the scientific community show the population and the world politicians that this is, without categorically 99% consensus true? Why are the governments of the world not running to draw these trillions and trillions of pounds, not 1 trillion, but trillions and trillions from the world GDP to hit the problem? You can't answer that question, can you? Because it's fucking bullshit. That's why. It's fucking bullshit. So I rate his book. I like his book. I give it 4 out of 5. But do I agree with him? A lot of the things he says, I think I'd say 30% of it I agree with it. But I don't like that he's clearly driven by political science. I don't like what the New Scientist magazine did over COVID. I don't like the scientific establishment. I think it's corrupt. I don't think, because science is basically driven by human beings ultimately, and human beings have their own bias, even though science shouldn't. I think the scientific community, as much as I revere science as a subject, I think the scientific community have basically shown themselves up both in the pandemic recently, and they chose a side based on where the money was, and I think they're doing the exact same thing over man-made climate change. Now, yes, you might be able to argue intellectually against this, but the truth is the truth. At the end of the day, the truth is the truth. If it was happening, then I would be 100% behind it. But the fact is that even if it is happening, right, even if we are on this brink of disaster, or we might even be there according to some of them, even if we are there, even if we try to create net zero by 2050 or even by 2030, it's still not going to change the temperature from rising to the warnings that they're predicting. So you're wanting to literally harm the entire infrastructure of society in some terribly bad ways, in some retrospects, for something that may not even do anything. So that's it. I'm sorry this video, feel this video is not being very good. I apologise if it isn't. This is like the 4th take on it now. it's a video that's hard to get across how frustrated I feel. I know that people will say, well, you're not a scientist, who are you? Who the fuck do you think you are? Like, Rowan Hooper's got a PhD. I'm sorry, but that's the dumbest, that's like linguistic language manipulation, and if you're too thick to understand what that means, then I don't have the time or the interest to talk to you and explain it to you. The scientific community are fallible, they are influenced, they are politically driven often, they have their own agendas, they're self-serving, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say on this thing. So if you've liked this video, give me a like, subscribe to my channel if you're a bookworm like myself. If you're not a fan of what I've said on this particular subject, then it's just my view after years of researching it. Trust me, I'm an environmentalist. I think that human beings should do a lot more to improve the way we treat the earth, the way we treat each other, and the way we use information. And the way I see it at the moment with my little brain, I think that the world has been manipulated by very powerful forces through media, through science, and through manipulations of lies and subject material without explaining or presenting the full picture. Unless you present things where you present all the facts on a subject and you do it unbiased and let people make their own decisions. But we live in a world where political establishments and science will only present what they think will manipulate you to their side of their argument, when that's just not the truth. It's not biased. It's not unbiased anyway. So that's my thoughts on this. So would I buy the book? I'm really glad I bought it. I've learnt a lot from the book, but politically I don't align with Rowan Hooper. I think to bring up white or race in the book, or the imperialism of British Empire, to bring up Donald Trump, to bring up sex, gender, I just think you're a fucking moron, to be quite honest with you. So, go and buy it if you want to see where I'm coming from. I've read this book in frustration because I knew straight away when I started coming across some of the things he was saying that he had a bias, and while I try to be unbiased, I'm not saying I don't, but while I try to be unbiased, I don't think that someone writing a book about so many prominent subjects should let their bias lead them. Vegan, vegetarian bias, you know, CO2 bias, and the rest of it. So that's it, guys. I'm going to go now because I'm doing my own editing, but that's it. So what are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you think that I'm a moron? Let me know down below. See you later.